I'm talking to you guys right now. 20% of what y'all do is bringing in 80% of the good into your life. And 80% of what you do is only bringing in 20% of the good, okay? So if we can figure out what's the 20% that's bringing in all the good and either eliminate, automate, or delegate the other 80% as much as we can, then we have a great life. We're working in our sweet spot because that's usually the thing that's bringing in the money. Well, I think the first thing to do is figure out what are the things you're really not good at. And that doesn't mean you don't want to do them, but that means you just really aren't good at, and make a list of those things. And there are VAs out there right now that you can hire, for 3 hours a week, And the funny thing is if you hire somebody for 3 hours a week and they're really, really good at what they do, they can do what would take you 15 hours a week to do. And they can do it in 3 hours, seriously. When you start any business whatsoever, you're going to have to do you start a business, you're going to have to do a whole bunch of stuff on your own for a while. But I think the sooner that you can get the right people, like get a good bookkeeper and to keep the books and to have everything ready for when tax time comes around, they're really not that expensive. And that type thinking is just smart thinking. But again, most people don't think that way. And so they stay at less than $1 million because they're not working smart. They're working on the business. No, they're working in the business, not on the business. And that would be the thing I think I do best, is getting people working on the business and get them out of the business. But it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of time to get there. I'm going to say this to the listeners too, that, I've got an executive assistant, blah, 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 and I pay her a certain amount of money per month, okay? Some people would go, well, that's a lot of money. And I go, yeah, but she probably brings me 10 times more income than I pay her, because I'm not having to deal with all that junk that she does. And if I was doing that junk, my business would be crap because I don't do that stuff good. Does that make sense? So sometimes you need to invest to get the right thing going for you, so that you can get in those things.
Welcome to the Abundant Journey podcast, where we talk with incredible entrepreneurs who give world-class advice from their own journeys. I'm your host, Nick James, and I'm a commercial banker turned business owner, along with my co-host, Nick Offenkamp. We want to help you grow and scale your business while not losing sight of what matters most. Join us as we learn from the experts what it takes to grow $1 million business. Welcome, friends, entrepreneurs, business owners, back to another episode of the Abundant Journey podcast. I am your host, Nick James, and you are hanging out with me and Nick Offenkamp today. But we have, as always, another incredible guest lined up, Robert Mallon, coming from Georgia. Robert, how are you, sir?
I am doing awesome today because I'm with you guys.
Let's go. No,
by the way, I speak Southern. Can you understand what I'm saying?
That is A-okay.
With our new AI tools, actually, we're able to translate from Southern. Yes.
I love it. Robert, our audience some of them may know you because you have been a familiar voice over the years. You are an entrepreneur. You are a business coach. You are a man of faith. And you have been a podcaster with like 3 times the amount of podcast episodes that Nick and I have ever done. So we are super excited to be hanging out with you today. Thank you. Now, where's home for you? Tell us a little bit about a day in the life today and what that looks like.
Got it. I live in Gainesville, Georgia, which is just a little bit northeast of Atlanta, Georgia. We're kind of going up towards the mountains, and there's a lake here called Lake Lanier, which actually has more shoreline than South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia put together. Okay, so it's a big lake that a lot of people don't know about, but it's a pretty neat place.
Awesome.
Let's see. I am, as you said, I'm a professional coach, do a lot of executive coaching and working with larger companies, like the leadership teams within larger companies, and actually started this business January 3rd, 2003. So it's going to be 22 years and about 3 weeks from now. So it's been a lot of fun.
And I feel like you're being pretty humble in who you've worked with. I was looking at the list on your website. I mean, you had me at Chick-fil-A with some of the executives you put. But I mean, there's a ton of huge, like Fortune 500, if not Fortune 50 companies that are on there. So you've had some really amazing opportunities to be part of some real big executive leadership coaching, and it's incredible.
It's been fun, and it didn't start out that way. you had to move up a little bit. So
That's it.
Yeah. Well, and that's perfect, because I mean that's part of what we would love to hear about is since it didn't just start out with walking into the C-suite of CEO and C-suite of Chick-fil-A and coaching them. How did you get your start in entrepreneurship?
I'll kind of go back. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I worked in restaurants some during my teenage years, but I worked at a dinner theater, I guess probably from 18 to about 22 years old. And back then, this was back in the 70s, actually. We were making $150 a night. It was just, which back then that would be like $500 a night. Now, probably more than that. But I just found that I really enjoyed the restaurant business. So when I got out of college, I went to work with Steak and Ale restaurants. Are y'all familiar with Steak and Ale? Steak and Ale. They were a national company, really high-end, nice steakhouse, but there were about 350 or so of those. And then I went to work with Brinker, which is Chili's and Macaroni Grill and On the Border. And so I had restaurants all over the Southeast, really in about 6 or 7 states, and I was traveling a lot. I'm married. I've got 3 sons. And during a lot of that travel, I was missing a lot of football games and baseball games and stuff like that, And so back in October 2002, I made a decision. A friend of mine who's a real estate broker, I was just talking to him about, I need to do something else, in my life. And he said, well, I'm working with an executive coach, which I'd never really heard of. This was 22 years. And he said, you should talk to the guy. So I called the guy up and we had a meeting, and I hired the guy. And the whole thing was, what do I do next? So I'd been in the restaurant business for about 25 years or so. Totally understood it, enjoyed it a lot. But restaurant business is hard because it's 7 days a week. It's, you just put a lot of work in. And so the whole thing was, what's next? And I thought, well, all I know is the restaurant business. What he helped me understand, which is, I think, a great reason to have a coach, he said, you totally get business. And business is business, whether it's insurance, restaurants, pharmacies, whatever it might be. And he says, and it seems like you're really good at growing leaders. And I had done that for 25 years, and I was known as a person that I could take somebody and raise them up pretty quickly. So anyway, he said, you know what I think you should be is a executive coach like me. And I was like, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. And so I guess within about 5 months, I left the restaurant industry, much to my wife's dismay, because, we have mortgage and 3 sons and all, and started this. And it was the best move I ever made in my life. Scary as can be, but it was just get out there and go after it. So that's how I got into this business.
Yeah. I love that story. And we're going to camp there for a few minutes, just both what you processed in making a big jump like that, because you typically don't hear that. I mean, a lot of times folks stay in the industry they know, they continue to level up with a certain skill set. But even maybe going back a little bit to what you just said, business is business, and there are certain skill sets that you learn that apply to whatever industry you're in. I want you to unpack that just a little bit, because I think a lot of times the common wisdom says, like, stay in the lane stay in the lane that your network is built around. however, I mean, you made a pretty significant change here. And so for you, what was kind of that light bulb moment where you were like, oh, what I've learned on my journey translates to whatever industry I'm in? How were you willing to make that jump?
Let me go down a path and then come back to that because I think it'll make sense. But around 2006 or 7, somebody said to me, he said, Robert, why are you here on this planet? And I'm like, I don't know, raise kids, and it was a very non-specific answer. And he says, you know what, you need to figure out what your mission is. And for some reason, like you get advice like that and you go, yeah, great. And then you go do something else. But for whatever reason, this guy really, it just hit me. And so for about a month, I just worked on what is my mission statement. And I'm going to say it to you right now, but I think it'll make sense on the whole thing. My mission is to inspire, teach, and encourage people to pursue God's potential in their life and to experience the joy of becoming all that God created them to be. Let me say it one more time quickly. To inspire, teach, and encourage people to pursue God's potential in their life and to experience the joy of becoming all that God created them to be. So I'm not sure if your listeners will be able to see this, but the way I look at it, people are here. They hope that they can get to here, but I truly believe with all my heart that everybody on this planet was born on purpose for a purpose, okay? So God can see this, okay? If I can help them figure out how to get to that, then I'm living my purpose, okay? Many people that I work with are not Christians, and that's okay, and sometimes there's a little saying y'all probably have heard, but preach the gospel every day, and every once in a while use words too, So sometimes I can I don't try to convert people. That's not why they pay me. But sometimes just through our interactions, people start asking questions, and I'm happy to answer those questions if that makes sense to you. And so I think going back to what you said about, what was the light bulb moment? I think when he said to me, you love to grow leaders. And I realized over the last 25 years that is truly what I'd been doing the whole time, is just investing in people. And then when I thought about if that's all I could do, would that be satisfaction to me? And it's beyond satisfaction, So it just opened the door to this new, very old thing now, 22 years. But does that answer the question? Is that,
I think that's an excellent answer. And I would, speaking of that time of making the transition, so having had so much experience in the restaurant industry, it sounds like about a 4-month process of deciding to make the leap. And then what does it look like to get this executive coaching business off the ground? Especially, we have the privilege now in 2024 when we're recording this, that most people have a category for executive coaching. Coaching as an industry has really grown over the last 5 years or so. But when you were starting in the early mid 2000s, it was pretty new, I imagine, at that point. It was new to you and to most people. So what did that look like with establishing yourself?
This will seem like a little bit of off the chart here or off the path, but I started speaking a lot. And I actually, during the 2000s, I did somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,600 or 1,700 full-day seminars all over the country. But I've actually done them in every state except for in North Dakota. Wow. Never been to North Dakota, and it's the only state I've never been at, and I've got to get a plane ticket to go up there just so I can get off it. But everywhere, and many of multiple times. Well, when I started speaking, for whatever reason, people liked what I was talking about, and people would come up after a talk and they would say, "Hey, do you work with companies, or do you work with individuals?" And I went, "Oh yeah."
I do now.
By the way, y'all heard this before. It's like flying an airplane while you're building it. All I had to do was be like 2 weeks ahead of where they were, and I did a lot of study. I did a lot of development of curriculum and things like that. And for whatever reason, it's very part of my DNA. Like I really enjoy that part of it, is putting things, because I like to learn myself,
Yeah.
And so learning that type of stuff. And then people started talking, and, other companies started calling and things like that. And so it didn't take very long at all, but a lot of it was just people liked what I did when I spoke and then asked.
Yeah. Well, and my mind goes to, you've got 25 years, I think, at this point in the restaurant industry. I'm assuming a lot of these early folks that wanted to work with you, were they in the restaurant industry? And so you're shaking your head no for the listener who's just listening.
Yep.
So I'm kind of curious, what were some of those skills that you realized that translated over that allowed you to be a consultant, be a coach? And like you're saying, just a couple weeks ahead, I mean, you clearly said, all right, I've learned business and I can help you. And, but there's got to be some level of feeling, maybe that daunting feeling of, man, am I qualified to help these people?
Yeah. Back when I first started working in restaurants, I knew that I wasn't good at managing people because I'd never done it. And I was young. I was 24, 25 years old, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so I bought some books. And there's one book that I'm going to recommend to your listeners that they don't buy because it was so bad, but it helped me a lot. It was called, what the heck was the name of it? Coaching for Improved Work Performance by a guy named Ferdinand something. Okay.
Cross it off the list.
Okay.
Cross it off the list.
It was like I don't know. It was okay. Sort of an okay book, but I got some things out of it. And what I realized was I didn't have the right tools to manage and lead people. And so I want to take you down another path. When I was in high school, I worked for a couple of summers with a carpenter. He was a master carpenter, and this guy had like 35 years of carpentry experience. Well, I went to Sears and I bought a tool belt and I bought a hammer and I bought the tape measure and all that. He told me what to buy and all. But my tool belt was like brand spanking new, and all the tools were brand spanking new. So we'd be up on a roof or something like that, working away. And this guy had like 30 plus years experience. We had the same tools in our tool belt, but he knew how to use the tools and I didn't. Does that make sense to you? Okay.
100%.
So I started finding tools for managing and leading people just through reading books and talking to leaders who were above me and just asking questions. And the way that my mom packages them, it's like a different tool, and, the different things. And so I've always thought that most managers and most leaders don't have that inquisitive nature that I have. So they have not gone after learning the tools, and I can give them those tools in a way that they enjoy getting the tools, and then also provide accountability to make sure that they're using the tools so that it's not just information without transformation. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me was the thing of, I just had this thing when I was young that I wanted to learn and I wanted to get better because I knew, like I fired some people that I shouldn't have fired. And I'm sure I yelled at people that I shouldn't have yelled at. And I didn't know how to do it, and I knew that I wanted to get really, really good at managing and leading people. So I became a student.
Robert, that's a really good line, really interesting line. The idea of information without transformation, and especially when we live in such an information-rich age, where people can go on to YouTube or get Kindle Unlimited, and you can download almost any book, any knowledge that you want, and yet we know that there are a lot of people who will binge on YouTube get tons of information, but never experience the sort of transformation that they actually need to lead their people, see the changes that they want in their life or in their business. And so I'd love for you to, we kind of glossed past it a little bit or took it as a given that most of our listeners understand what an executive coach is. But I think it'd be great to bring some more definition to that, because it's not just information that you're providing people, you're doing a whole lot more. And so what does executive coaching look like for the folks that you're working with?
Let me give you several different things. But one thing I started doing with my clients around 2006 or so, the first 4 or 5 years that I was doing it, all I did was business coaching and professional development with a person, And what I found was if all I do is focus on the person, the professional side of the person's life, their business or their career, if they have a great career, but their husband or wife gives them divorce papers because they suck at being a partner, then why didn't I bring that up, Or if, and this happened, if somebody has a great business and they die at their desk from a heart attack because they're out of shape, then, and I didn't talk to them about what are you doing, So every client that I've had since probably in the last 18 years, we go through every 90 days a thing called a life category sheet, okay? And what we do is there's 10 categories, and this is just top of the mind, but professional, financial, family, educational, spiritual, fun and recreation, community, so giving your time away, time management, organization, physical health, and friends social. So the social relational part of life. And we go through and we look at it. I was just right before you guys, I just got off a call from Florida doing it with a guy. And then we always go after professional, but then we go after 2 other areas too. Okay. Specific, and we get super specific. We set a very, very, very specific goal of exactly what they're going to do. Okay. And that's going to be for the next 90 days. So when I'm working with a client, okay, and I'll go to the other part in a second. Let's pretend I've got 2 Nicks on the call, but I want y'all to think out 25 years from now. I'm not sure exactly what the date's going to, it's going to be 2050. We're going to be going into 2050 at that point. What do you want your life to look like? And that's a crazy question, and you guys aren't really thinking about that right now. But seriously, really, what do you want your life to think of? I have no idea, and you guys have no idea because of the way that life is changing. Okay, but if every 90 days you sit down and you go through this process, okay, 4 times per year times 25 years, that's 100 what I call growth cycles, okay? Mm-hmm. So people like to set goals for a year, and I say don't do that because you're going to wait till October before you even start working on the goal, okay? I mean, truly, that's what people do. They think, I got plenty of time, I'll start this thing later. So we're always going after that. And then a couple other things, like I do a lot of teaching and training on how to be a great leader. And there's seriously hundreds of things I do to help them in that regard, leaders, managing, different things like that. So we're going after their whole life, but we're concentrating in on how do they run the business best. And another thing I do with some of my clients, and this works out great, the day before our call, I say, I want you to give me one thing, either personal or professional. Usually professional, they give it, but write a paragraph about something that you want to talk about, or you need to process, it's a problem that you're dealing with, it's a situation that you need to handle at work, whatever it might be, but get super specific. And I get it the day before, and that gives me about 24 hours to really think about it so that I'm ready when we get together. And then what most business owners and really a lot of leaders within companies, they don't have anybody that they can talk to process these things, and they're afraid to, or they're embarrassed to talk about these things. And so we spend 10 or 15 minutes every 1 hour call talking about the things that they need most, so that they're growing. And we're hitting things like, and life is always changing. So we're just kind of going with the flow of things and making sure that it's nice and smooth for them going through that. So
I think that's super helpful. I want you to speak a little bit to there seems to be a large group that has this megaphone of be obsessed with one thing, be obsessed with your goal, be obsessed with this one thing that's going to drive. You're going to orient your life around this thing. But really what I'm hearing from you is very contrarian to that, which I love. And it is, how do all of the different elements of life work together? And I think that we talk a ton about that. One of our phrases I think we use here is, how do you grow and scale and become successful? Because we know it takes so much time and effort and energy, but how do you do that without losing your soul? And so I think as as you go through and coach people, it sounds like you really try to take that holistic approach. And I would imagine those other categories actually help boost success of the goals instead of become a detriment. So speak to that a little bit.
It's funny that you bring that up, because there's y'all might even know who I'm talking about, but there's a brother-sister team that's talking a lot about health now. I think their last name is Means, Means, but she was a doctor. She was Stanford educated, and she became a specialist, and I think she was ear, nose, and throat. And what she started finding with American medicine, everything is specialized. So if you have an ear problem, it's a different person than if you have an ear, nose, throat. And if you have a foot problem, it's a podiatrist. And what she said was, it's the whole body together, and we need to treat the whole body. And many times it's what's going on in our gut that's causing the earache or something like that. And so I hope that equates over to, if you're not going after the educational part, or let's say if you're not going after the financial part of your life and you're ignoring that, but you're going after all this other stuff, then you're going to have a weakness, And so I think it is a holistic approach. Again, 3/4 of what I do is business related, but the other quarter is very important, because they need to have a great life and not look back and feel like they wasted everything by going after one thing. Can I add one more thing? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. I start on day one talking about this, and I'm talking to you guys right now. 20% of what y'all do is bringing in 80% of the good into your life. And 80% of what you do is only bringing in 20% of the good. Okay. So if we can figure out what's the 20% that's bringing in all the good, and either eliminate, automate, or delegate the other 80% as much as we can, then we have a great life. We're working in our sweet spot, because that's usually the thing that's bringing in the money. And so that again goes away from the one thing. Just go after one thing. Mm-hmm. It's not one thing. There's a lot of different things you've got to do every day, but probably most of your listeners are doing way too many things. Okay. And a person like me, I can help. I'm at 35,000 feet. They're at 10 feet. And I can look and I can see what they're doing wrong. And I can help them start to eliminate, automate, or delegate that stuff so that they're in their sweet spot working. That's when things start taking off.
Yeah, I really love that. What, as much as you want to or can speak to it, what is that process of identifying the 20% that's driving 80% of the good in your life?
I have a sheet. What the heck is the name of the sheet? Anyway, it's got 2 columns and a bunch of rows. Let's say like 20 rows on each side. One of them says what I'm best at. And then the other one says what I should never do again. Okay. And I walk them through, and in the middle it says EAD, which stands for eliminate, automate. And that's a separate column that's very narrow, right? So give you, for example, I think around 2016, 15, something like that, I figured this out, and I used it all myself first. And what I found was like the things I probably had 12, 14 different things things that I'm really, really good at. I'm a front of the house person, if that makes sense. I'm not the back of the house. So I'm good on a stage. I'm good with clients. I'm really good at telling stories, and I'm not bragging. I'm just saying it's a natural gift that I think God gave me. And I can tell stories that have like a meaning to it at the end. I think I'm an incredible encourager. It's one of my spiritual gifts is, oh God, what's the name? It starts with an E. Anyway, it means encouragement, and it's a weird name. But anyway, that's one of my things. But then over here on the other side, I put things like email. Like I suck at email. I suck at it. Like I don't like doing email. Bookkeeping. It's like, it's just terrible, And I came, yard works, stuff like that. Like I hadn't cut my grass. I've had a company for like 14, 15 years, and it looks great, and it's so much better than if I did it, What a waste of time for it. Now, I've got a garden that I love doing, small little vegetable garden. I love doing that kind of stuff, but like cutting the grass, no, I did that way too much when I was a kid. I'm done with that sort of stuff. And so walking them through and then figuring out the amount of hours that they're spending on the things that they really should never be doing, and showing them that by eliminating, automating, and then we go into what do we eliminate first? What do we delegate first? And then teaching them how to delegate, stuff like that, so that they're working in their zone of genius, basically, as much as that's not a 1 week thing. That's not that's something that could take 6 months of, just really working things through. But when Nick James, what's your zone of genius? What is the one thing that you're super good at besides your looks? Let's take that one.
Well, you took that away, so I don't know that I got an answer anymore. And if my wife's listening, she just rolled her eyes. So, no, I would say what I love doing is this. I mean, it's networking, it's building relationships, it's hearing people's stories, asking questions. Yeah. I mean, that's probably obvious to the listeners after doing this for 2 years, and we keep going. Is just having conversations with people, identifying ways they can grow. Similar, probably to what you like doing.
And when you're working in those zones of genius, those things that, and I go back to God every time. It's like there's certain like details I just don't like, But Rebecca, who set this up for us, my assistant, she loves all the details, right? So I pay her to take care of all the stuff so that I can do this and work with my clients and not worry about any of the details. And we've been together 8 years. Okay. I'm going to say this to the listeners too, that, I've got an executive assistant, blah, 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 and I pay her a certain amount of money per month. Okay. Some people would go, well, that's a lot of money. And I go, yeah, but she probably brings me 10 times more income than I pay her, because I'm not having to deal with all that junk that she does. And if I was doing that junk, my business would be crap, because I don't do that stuff good. Does that make sense? So sometimes you need to invest to get the right thing going for you, so that you can get in those things.
Well, and that's an interesting point that you bring up, because, we talk a lot here about how our listeners, we say, hey, we want to help you grow and scale your business past 1 million. And there's not a magical number in 1 million, but I think we look on and say, hey, getting to that mark, you can really start implementing some team members. Mm-hmm. You can start putting systems and processes in place so you don't have to wear all the hats. But I'm curious how this translates to somebody who's a year or two in, and at this point they've worked themselves a job and they're wearing 15 hats, and maybe their business isn't making enough to hire an executive assistant type of a situation. What are the steps early on? Like you said, this isn't a week process. And I think it's good for the listener to understand that. Like this is more, I would think, a mindset of this is how I'm going to take steps forward for the business with the mindset that I need to fire myself from different roles and I need to delegate and bring on the right team members. But how do you get started if you feel like you're buried and you're the person wearing all the hats?
Well, I think the first thing to do is figure out what are the things you're really not good at. And that doesn't mean you don't want to do them, but that means you just really aren't good at, and make a list of those things. And there are VAs out there right now that you can hire, for 3 hours a week, And the funny thing is if you hire somebody for 3 hours a week and they're really, really good at what they do, they can do what would take you 15 hours a week to do. And they can do it in 3 hours. Seriously, Yeah. Something when you start any business whatsoever, you're going to have to do a whole, you start a business, you're going to have to do a whole bunch of stuff on your own for a while. But I think the sooner that you can get the right people, like get a good bookkeeper, and you can pay a bookkeeper $75 a month, to keep the books and to have everything ready for when tax time comes around. They're really not that expensive. And that type thinking is just smart thinking. But again, most people don't think that way. And so they stay at less than $1 million because they're not working smart. They're working on the business. No, they're working in the business, not on the business. And that would be the thing I think I do best, is getting people working on the business and get them out of the business. But it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah. No, I think that'll resonate with so many of our listeners, and certainly resonates personally, because I know the number of times that I feel like in life I'm doing a ton of things, but just not doing any of them well. And the things that I'm most passionate about and should be given the best of myself to, I don't feel like I've got the capacity to do it, because I'm so burdened by, even if they're easier tasks, they burn me out because I hate doing them. There's that analogy of like, if you got a wheelbarrow full of 100 pounds of rocks, it makes all the difference if you're bringing that wheelbarrow downhill versus trying to push it uphill. And so trying to get downhill as much as possible. But I wanted to ask you as well, like, I think one of the struggles in entrepreneurship and getting started in any business, a lot of folks feel this imposter syndrome. And especially as they start to bring on any sort of staff and they got people looking to them for leadership, and they're feeling like, I don't know, I'm building this, like you were saying about your executive coaching business. Like I'm just 2 steps ahead of you guys figuring this all out. And so I'm curious how you assess that with people. Should some entrepreneurs fear the fact that, like, maybe you did get into this and you're not actually cut out for it? Or are there ways of working through that imposter syndrome?
I think to tell yourself right up front that you're going to feel it, you're 1,000% going to feel it. There's no way not to feel it. Okay. There's a saying that I love: do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. Do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. And so I think part of being an entrepreneur is facing fear every single solitary day. That's just, you own a business, you work for a business, you're taken care of. You own the business, it's all on you. And if it goes down, you go down with it too. Is that a bad thing to have that fear? I don't think so at all. Because fear, good, solid fear can drive you in the right direction. It's going to make you get up a little bit earlier, probably go to bed a little bit later and stuff like that. But when you're afraid to pick up that phone, for example, to call that big account that might be the one that breaks you through, to the next time, it's like, do the thing you fear, and the death of fear is certain. You pick up the phone, you make the call, you have a great conversation, you go, yes. How did that happen? Well, you picked up the phone, and you made the call, so it's just a matter of facing the fear, doing something with that fear every single solitary day. But I would absolutely, Nick, I would expect that it's going to be there every single day. And it does go away after a while, but it's not within a few months. It's usually within a few years, if not even longer than that you're going to have that fear. But it's fun,
Yeah.
You can work for somebody else and be the walking dead. That's what I call them. There's so many. If somebody's listening to that and you're working for another company, I didn't just call you a name, but I'd say about 80% of people out there are what I literally call the walking dead. Like they hate what they do for a living, but they're afraid to go do something else, Yeah. And so, they're living, who was it said, lives of quiet desperation, and that's most people. That is the vast majority. They want to retire. They can't wait till they retire. And then 3 months into retirement, they go, well, this sucks. I got nothing to do. I've got no purpose, so.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. You got to learn to fear that experience of being the walking dead more than you fear the possibility of failure.
We only do this one time. We only do this life one time. And it's good to get out. It's good to do things that are scary. It's extremely good to do things that are scary.
Well, and in that, maybe there's a good chance to jump back to your journey and thinking about that big transition out of the restaurant industry. And you mentioned, your wife was like, where are we going with this thing? Obviously, trust and support was there. And now you're on the other end of it where you're able to look on and say, hey, it worked. I mean, it brought, I'm sure, tears and sweat and a whole lot of work, but it happened and you guys were able to do it and you've had an incredible journey in that transition. But just thinking about the entrepreneur who is, on that end prior to making the jump, the banker in me says, how do you mitigate risk? How do you, take steps to preserve yourself? But yet you always have to take that step in faith. You always have to take that step forward if you're going to try to accomplish something beyond what you're doing and kind of what you're saying there. So maybe either in your personal experience or as you've talked with executives and coached and worked with them, I mean, what are some ways to overcome those fears that seem so paralyzing?
I'm making a note because I want to make sure I say something there. Okay. I want to go all the way back to 2002 when I was making that decision. And this is vivid to me, a picture that I remember. I felt like, and I'm not going to get up, but if I walked over there and just stood in front of you guys, and let's pretend that there's like a 5-foot circle around me, that was my comfort zone. And I was extremely comfortable in the restaurant business. Like I get it, I understand it. And again, I didn't realize that a lot of what I knew and what I learned over the 25 years was very applicable to everything else, but I just thought I had this little thing. When I turned my notice in, they were extremely surprised. I was scared to death. And what I felt like was if I was sitting in the middle of that circle, I put one foot outside of the comfort zone and the other foot was still in the comfort zone, But and it was very scary to put that foot out because I had lived 25 years. I mean, I'd take chances and stuff like that, but it was, I was okay. You know what I mean? I was working for huge companies and they were taking care of me, right? Here's what I found over the course of the next several months and the next several years. Every time I took a step out of the comfort zone, it didn't just get bigger in that area. The whole circle got bigger. Does that make sense? So it went from 6 to 7 feet, then 7 to 10 feet, then, 10 to 20 feet, whatever. And I remember the very first time I did a seminar, which I'd never done. I'd spoken to groups before, but I knew who the groups were and all that kind of stuff. I went to Burlington, Vermont, probably February of 2003. And I was at a Holiday Inn and it was packed out. There was probably 80 or 90 people in this one room. And I was doing a leadership seminar. And this is crazy, but when I get nervous, when I get nervous, my nose would run. Okay. And I was scared to death because I was starting at 9 o'clock in the morning and going till 4 o'clock with some breaks and lunch and all. But I was scared to death and I'd never done any of the material before. So I had a box of Kleenex up front and I had a trash can. And I said, folks, I'm so sorry, but I've just got a really bad cold today. And I was lying my head off. I was just scared. That's no longer a problem for me, but I don't know why, but it was just like some people's hands sweat. Well, my nose ran when I got nervous. Yeah. So all day long, I'm like just wiping my nose and all that kind of stuff. And at the end, people walked up and they went, that was awesome. That's the best. And I'm like, really? Like, really? And it gave me a little bit of confidence, and then, and it just kept going. The other thing that I wrote down, Nick, to remember, I think having accountability, like when you're scared, you've got to have somebody off to the side. And no offense to wives or husbands, but that was not going to be my wife telling me, oh, you're going to do great and all that kind of stuff, because she's always going to say that kind of stuff. What I needed was this coach in my life. And I kept him for about a year, until I felt like I was really on my feet. And man, he's spoken to my life, and he gave me a lot of confidence when I didn't have confidence. And so I really, really feel like two things with my clients. I'm really good at giving them confidence, but I'm super good. I call it loving accountability, sometimes with a big stick. You know what I mean? And sometimes I got to beat them over the head, but they know that I'm doing that in love to them. And sometimes they need me to get upset with them and call them out when they're backing up or when they're, not doing what they. And so I would say for anybody, you need to have that type of a person in your life who is safe and who loves you and has your best interest at heart. You really need that. That's going to really lead you to great success, having that.
Yeah. I think that really gets at that information versus transformation kind of piece as well. Because again, like while there's so much great information out there, and while that accountability partner probably isn't telling you something that you don't already know, that you haven't already heard or read or couldn't get somewhere else, the thing that a YouTube video just can never do is it can't apply that to you specifically in that moment of fear, in that moment of need. It can't take into account all the other factors that are going on in your life and call you to the carpet sometimes when you need that as well. And so I think that's such a powerful element. I mean, it's what keeps us human, right? Is needing those relationships. And especially now because there are so many coaches, but not all coaches are created equal, as I'm sure you know. And so I am curious, like as people are thinking through, okay, I'm convinced that I need that accountability partner. I realize that probably the best person isn't my wife or even my friends, as much as they love me. If they haven't gone through it, they're probably not the best person. How does somebody go about evaluating whether it's an accountability partner or a coach? What are the kind of qualities that they should be looking for and trying to figure out that fit?
That's a great question. I'll try to come up with a good answer. I think you need somebody with integrity. I know you guys, you know me. I would say, I know that my father watches what I'm doing. And there's a lot, I'm sure there's a lot of coaches out there, and I'm not putting them down, but I'm just saying I would want to have somebody equally yoked. And I think that means a lot right there. Since 2002, I've never looked for another coach, quite frankly. I know what I do. And people, sometimes companies will say, well, what certification do you have? And I go 40 years of being in business, and right. I can look back and I can say, and I can give you hundreds of people that will tell you that I get great results. So I have 0 certifications in coaching, and I'm so glad I don't, to be quite frank, because they give you cookie cutter ways of doing it, and that's not the way to do it, I don't think. Can I give you another? And I want you guys to look at me and say yes to me right now. Promise me right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
If you want, write this down, robertmallon.com. Okay. And you're promising right now, Nick, you're looking at me sort of, okay. As soon as we get off this call, and as soon as your listeners get off the call, whether they ever get in touch with me or not, go to my page it's going to say sign up for newsletter. Okay. It's different. This sounds like so hokey. It's so different than any newsletter they're going to get. But every single week it goes out. It's something that I coached a leader on. It's short and sweet, but it's a lesson, and it's a tool in your tool belt every single solitary week that you can put in there. And there's tons of people on that newsletter. I have no idea who these people are, and I don't care. Mm. But to me, it's like a gift that I give the world, maybe.
It's awesome.
And so I want you guys to get signed up for that. There's always something I taught. There's always something to ponder, and it's usually a sentence just to make you kind of go, okay. Then something I learned. So it's something out of a book, and it's short and sweet on that, but just a point I learned in a book. And then something I saw. So there's always a photo in there of, usually they're kind of funny or they're beautiful, like places I've been recently, just nice places. But it's 3 minutes a week of getting a tool in your tool belt. And so if people were evaluating, I would look for a person that would write something like that, or that would have the experiences that you would read in that, because you know that they know what they're talking about. And that sounded so conceited when I said that just now, but
I easy, no brainer to sign up for that, and we'll make it even easier.
I'll be looking in 10 minutes to see if you did. I'm just
you got it, and we'll make it even easier for our listeners, and include that link down in the show notes. So just a one click away for anybody who's listening to the podcast. That's an amazing resource.
And let me say
2 clicks. That's right. You got to get to the site.
Then you're going to get an email, and you got to say, yes, I did sign up. If you don't do that, you'll never get it. There you go.
That's true.
Good.
That's good.
Well, and I think, again, in an information age where so much voice and so much noise is out there, do this, don't do that, I think it's a refreshing perspective. Again, like you're saying, there's so many people out there who do flash their credentials, but yet they've not lived it. And so to be able to sit here and have this conversation, and to know that you've not only lived it in your own life for 40 years plus, but you've coached big executives, big, high-powered CEOs, high-powered CFOs, and folks growing and running large companies is huge. As we kind of start to think about landing this thing, I want to shift a little bit to the why. And really, I think we got to go back to the beginning. And you started with this power statement of, hey, what launched your why is that mission statement and crafting that. We've heard similar things, I think, in having conversations with guests, but you brought such a different perspective on, hey, identifying why you're here, identifying what your mission is and what to go for. So rather than maybe reflecting on you, I'd love to hear your advice to the listener, the entrepreneur who maybe hasn't done that. What are some practical steps that they can take as they begin to craft that mission, and why? And maybe part 2 to that, I'm going to throw it both at you. How do you still move forward if you don't feel like you've figured that out yet?
I think that's great. This is going to sound very self-serving, but I promise you, I'm telling you the truth. About a month ago, a guy came to me, and I had said that missions. I don't say that to hardly any people at all, but I said it in front of a group of business people here in town. And he said, here's mine. And it was really, really good. He said, nobody has those things, and so that day I wrote down, I'm going to develop a program to help people come up with their mission statement for life. My mission is to. And I've done a lot of reading on it. I've done some research and stuff like that. And I'll probably have it done by the end of January. I'm probably going to put some of that in the newsletter, to be quite frank with it, because I think if you do have that mission, and I can put some of the steps that it takes to actually create your mission statement. But that for 18 years now, it's been my compass. And here's the most important part, Nick. It's helped me say no to so many things. Because if I'm not inspiring, teaching, encouraging people to pursue God's, but if I'm not doing that, then I need to say no, and that's really kept me on path. I don't even know what your question was now, but that was the answer that came to my mind.
Well, no, I love it. I think that is an answer. I think just on the practical level, someone's hearing this and they're saying, wow, like Robert's got his life figured out. Robert's, knows what his purpose is. I don't know what mine is. So where do you begin? And can you move forward without having that all figured out?
Yeah, I think so. And actually, another good thought that came to mind, Strength Finders. Have y'all heard of that? I'm sure you have.
Yeah.
Like there's Strength Finders, there's DISC, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all that kind of stuff. But I think Strength Finders, if you can figure out what your top 3 strengths are in life, okay? At the church I go to, there's we've done spiritual gifts, like what are your top 3? There's a guy named Dr. Dan Ryland. Dan used to be John Maxwell's. He was the head of the John Maxwell Company, but he's a really, really good friend of mine. And we've got a men's thing that we do at church, and we help men understand what their top 3 spiritual gifts are. All 3 of mine are used every single day in my work. And so if you can figure out what your top 3 spiritual gifts are, or if you go to Strength Finders, I think it's $59 to take the Strength Finders test. And they'll tell you, like, here's what that means. So they'll give you a couple of paragraphs. Or I think for like $149 or something like that, they'll actually have a coach walk you through. How does that deliver out, in the real world? What could you do to do that? But I think understanding what your strengths are, don't try to work on your weaknesses. Figure out what your strengths are and then try to work in your areas of strength every single solitary day. And then life gets real easy. And again, if we go back to the Christian part of it, if you're working in your spiritual gifts, like one of mine is teaching, one of mine is leadership. Those are 2 of my top 3 spiritual gifts. Like, and there's craftsmanship. There's all kinds of different spiritual gifts. But if you can figure out what those are, the way I look at it, God put those in you, and He didn't put them in you to be dormant. He put them in you to use. And so if you can figure out or have people help you figure out how do you use those spiritual gifts vocationally, then life gets awesome.
Yeah.
Y'all know that. You're doing it right now. That's why y'all are on this call, actually, because it's your spiritual gifts, for real. I can tell.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. Yeah. I think that's a really good place for folks to start. And I just love what you said. I just put a kind of exclamation point on it. But thinking of that mission statement as a compass and the importance of knowing what to say no to, because I think that's an even more difficult discipline to cultivate than what to say yes to. Because once you start to experience some success, the opportunities are endless, and you're going to be presented with a lot of really seemingly cool things. And if you don't know what your mission is, you can easily be stretching yourself too thin, saying yes to everything, or missing out on what you really ought to be doing. So this is super
important. Can I give you one last thing? And I wrote this down a few minutes back, but just right along what you're saying, Nick, I've got a saying: if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What that means, if an opportunity comes along, if you don't say, "Oh hell yeah, I'll do that." Excuse me, folks, for cussing. I don't mean
you good.
If you don't go, "Oh heck yeah, I want to do that," then don't do it. Because life is too short. And so if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. That's what we're leaving your listeners with. That's what they're going to think about me. That got cussed all the way through his.
Well, Robert said.
No, I love that advice, though, because it speaks to what's going on in the heart, like that visceral sort of reaction to it. And I think that you got to be in touch with yourself enough to recognize like, that fires me up. And if it doesn't actually get to that level where it's touching on your emotions, then what are you really doing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a work in progress, Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Robert, man, this is we could easily go another, we could turn this into a Joe Rogan episode and go another 2 or 3 hours unpacking everything. But I know that the day calls for a lot of other responsibilities. And so we will suffice to say, super grateful for everything that you have shared here. Would love to stay in touch and connect more in the future. But in the meantime, like I said, I'm going to include the link to your website and encourage all of our listeners to sign up for that newsletter. We'll be keeping an eye out. I'm going to be keeping an eye out personally for that program on developing a mission statement. That sounds so cool. Mission statement for life. Are there any other places that you'd like for folks to connect with you? Are you active on social media anywhere?
Not really that much. No. I've got a Facebook. I've taken everything off my phone because it just sort of gets in the way, to be quite frank. So. Yeah. Hey, got to know what to say no to. That's perfect. Right. So, well, and that's nice and simple as far as getting people to sign up for the newsletter is the best way to keep up with what you're doing. The email is robert@robertmallon.com. So it's very, very simple. That would be it.
Perfect.
And could I say one more thing? I'll say this. If anybody does want to talk, they could get in touch with Rebecca. No, actually just send it to me, robert@robertmallon. And Rebecca can set up like a 15 or 20 minute discovery call and we can talk. And we'll just see if there's a fit or if there's not a fit. And if there's no fit, that's okay too, because you want to get the right person. But that would be good. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I love the work that you're doing. And again, just so grateful for your time. Listeners, before you go, do make sure that you have subscribed to the show. And the best thing that you can do if you found value here, anything that resonated with you, do share it with a friend. And then, of course, leave a review. That all helps with discovery and all those fun things. But everybody, thank you. We'll be back again next week.